In the house, there was fear, there was shame. My dad was an alcoholic, and he would have a go at my mum. He would beat her up quite a lot, and if she wasn't around, he would have a go at me and my sister. I remember my first teacher in primary, was a lady called Miss Duncan. And my first memory was sitting on her knee crying, and her knowing exactly what was going on in our house. Outwardly, people thought I was. People thought I was the life and soul of the party. But there was sometimes I can't even remember. I remember waking up in bed with girls, and not knowing how I got there, and not knowing who they were. That Saturday night, he came back sober, a different man altogether, and you could see that in his face. There was something just different about him, and he sat with me and he said, "Look, Alistair, I want you to forgive me." Well, I knew what Christianity was, but by that time I was an atheist. I mean, how could there possibly be a God when he allows all this stuff to go on? But the more I watched my dad, the more I started to think, man, there must be something in this. I just knew that Jesus Christ had changed me. I just knew that God was in my life.
So, Dad, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, son. I'm just glad to be here and glad to see you.
Good to see you. I don't see you very often. I'd like to see you more.
Thank you very much.
When I moved to university, so when I moved to uni, I moved from Leeds to York, and when I went to uni, where did you go?
Devon.
The furthest place possible. I wonder why that is.
Well, we could have went to the Sahara Desert, but
Well, it'd been nice holidays in the Sahara Desert.
Well, we chose Devon, and it rained all the time.
To be fair, Devon was a pretty nice place to go to on the off season of uni. You know, and really needed a holiday after the hard graft at uni.
Yeah.
Studying PE at York St John.
From one holiday to another, really, wasn't it?
I'll tell you what though, some people I wish I'd have used all of the student loan that I got, right, and gone on some nice holidays. I went on one to skiing in France or Switzerland or wherever it was. I wish I'd have used a lot more money to do that rather than spend it on rubbish.
So what did you spend it on, like, Calvin?
Probably food.
Yeah, food.
Too much. I don't know.
Too much pizzas, was it?
Yeah, I don't know. I spent a lot. I don't know. To be fair though, I don't know where it went.
Yeah.
Accommodation. You see, living in York, it was a lot to live in York. About 600 and something quid. Anyway, so, Dad, on the topic of holidays, where would you go? Where's your holiday destination? Where would you go?
Well, I love going to Fuerteventura, but that's only when you have enough money to do it.
Is that volcanic sand? Is it in Fuerteventura? Is it brown?
No, that's Tenerife.
Oh,
Tenerife has got the volcanic stuff. But Fuerteventura, there is a volcano there. But it's a beautiful place. I love it. And very quiet. And it's also got heat all the year round.
Why have you not taken me on one of these holidays?
Because we want to go on holiday.
I find that very offensive. Anyway, so, Dad, I want to talk a little bit about your life. For those who don't know, this is my dad, even though I've said dad quite a few times. Alistair is his name. He's got a very interesting story, very interesting life. Well, I think so anyway. I'm maybe a bit biased, but you can be the judge of that. Just about how God has changed your whole life, changed your family's life, and we're going to dig into that a little bit deeper and just see how that's happened. So to start with, can you just give us a little lowdown, a little rundown of your childhood, of what family life was like? You clearly don't have an English accent. Well, I feel as though you do, but everyone says that you have like a little twinge to it. What twinge is that? Is it Caribbean, Welsh? What? Where are you from? You're not from England.
Definitely not Caribbean. I was born in Scotland. A little place called Bodham, just outside Peterhead, not far from Aberdeen, northeast of Scotland. We have a claim to fame. We are where I lived was the furthest easterly point in Britain. And I used to get up in the morning, look out the window, and there it was, the big lighthouse, Buchaness Lighthouse. And
Is that where Grandad used to take us? That
yes,
lighthouse.
that's right.
What a place.
Yeah, it was like across the bridge. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, wonderful. It wasn't until recently when we went up. Think for Granny's funeral, wasn't it?
Mm.
We went up for Granny's funeral, and we went to the place where Grandad used to take us. And I was looking around thinking, blimey, all the needles and glass and everything
Yeah.
that was in the like sand dunes and stuff.
Yeah.
Not sure if it was like that then.
No, it wasn't.
But yeah, it's like that now.
It used to be. It used to be a lovely place to live. There was a lot of Christians there, a lot of churches there, but it has just become like a drug city, really, and the drugs would come in from the fishing boats. So yeah, it's not a nice place to live now.
Mm. So it was a fishing town.
Yeah, fishing village. Just the bottom of our road, there was a lighthouse, and then there was a little harbour, and the main town, which is about 3 miles away, was Peterhead. That was the main fishing port in Europe.
Mm. Did you enjoy living there? Was it a nice place growing up? You said it was idyllic. You've mentioned that to me before, that it was a lovely place to grow up. Is that true, or?
Well, on one side you would have the sea, and on the other side you would have farmland. It was idyllic. When we were kids, there was a lot it was safe. We would go out and we would play football outside. We could wander wherever we go to, and actually it was safe. Beautiful scenery, and as a kid, it was perfect. Really, you could go down, you could swim in the harbour, or swim round the beside the lighthouse and everything. We would have little ponds where we could swim. So it was for me. It was brilliant, really.
So nice place growing up. What was your sort of family life like? Paint a picture of what it was like growing up in your home.
Well, I've been told that I was born in Peterhead, and then moved out to Bodham, and my mum would say that's when the problems really started. When they moved out, and moved to that area. As a kid, I suppose I lived. I'm saying it was an idyllic place, and it was idyllic, but in the house there was fear, there was shame, there was all sorts of emotions going on, because my dad was an alcoholic, and he would have a go at my mum. He would beat her up quite a lot, and if she wasn't around, he would have a go at me and my sister. So there was my sister Angela, there was myself, my mum and my dad, who lived in this 2 up 2 down house at the bottom of a road called Seaview Road, and it was, that's how it was. My dad was a fisherman, deep sea fisherman, so he would go out at about 12 on a Monday morning, between Sunday and Monday, because they wouldn't fish on a Sunday, and my dad would go out drunk, and then not every weekend obviously, but most weekends he would go out drunk on a Sunday, and then come back, and then land his fish, and then we wouldn't really see him, and sometimes we would see him on a Saturday, mostly we would see him on a Sunday, because he would be out drinking. So he would come home, drink all the money, or most of the money. Well, actually, he would give most of it away to his friends, because he had a lot of pals that he would drink with. So he'd go to the pubs, West End pub, they called it. And so that's what he would do. My mum would go out to work. She worked in a factory down the bottom of our road, where she would work hard.
What would you do in the factories? Like line work, like putting buttons in, or what was it?
No, it was a part, what they called a parton factory. So it was a crab factory. So what she would do is she would take the legs of crabs, and then take all the meat out of the crab, and that's what she did.
I couldn't see Granny doing that.
Well, it was cold. It was a cold environment. It was a hard work. But my mum would go out in the morning, very early, and come home late, just to put some food on the table. my mum was a hard worker. She did work hard.
So for all that time, I'm guessing you were in school then whilst that was going on, or were you left at home on your own? Or well, probably should have been in school, but probably weren't, were you?
Well, when in primary school, I went to primary school all the time. I loved primary school because it was an escape for me. I remember my first teacher in primary, nothing, was a lady called Miss Duncan, and she was an elderly lady. And my first memory was sitting on her knee crying, and her knowing exactly what was going on in our house, because at that time everybody knew everybody in that village, and they knew what was going on. But the thing was, everybody turned a blind eye to it. Nowadays, I think the kids would have been taken out of that environment. But in those days, you weren't.
So the environment was very hostile, very aggressive.
Yeah.
You said that, if your granddad wasn't beating your mum up, he would turn the attention to you and your sister.
Yeah.
Was that all the time then? Is that, was it very visible for you? Would you see that? Would you see him beating up your mum?
It's funny when you look back. Very often you see all you get is the bad things. There were a lot of good things as well. We would go on holiday. My dad would take us on holiday for a couple of weeks in the year, but it would always be somewhere where he could get drink. So he would take us to Butlins, and me and my sister would go out and we would be in the fair, and we would do different things, which was great because we had a bit of freedom. But my mum and dad would be out drinking, and we would be left in the little flat that we would rent. There were other times when, you would go out at home, and we would be told you don't say anything about what's going on in the house. So there's a lot of secrecy. But yet everybody knew what was going on because my dad was well known as a drinker, and there was always parties going on in the house.
Mm-hmm.
It's a slight exaggeration. It's not always, but very often there would be a party in our house. People would come round. My friends actually would start their drinking in my house. That's where they would begin their drinking. Because my dad was free with it, and there'd be lots of stuff going on. All my relations would actually go into the to the home, and they would know that there was drink there, and there was a lot of other things there that shouldn't have been there as a kid. So there was pornography, parties, all that kind of stuff was going on. I remember one time being in bed and the party going on down the stairs. I didn't. I all I can remember was waking up and there was a guy at the end of my bed. And thankfully nothing ever happened as far as I know. But that was, it wasn't common, but I can remember that one instance. Just waking up, seeing this guy, I didn't know who he was, but he was in the party, and my mum and dad were down the stairs partying away. Not that my mum liked that, she didn't like that, but she thought, well, to keep my dad around, she had to be involved in it.
Yeah.
Because if she didn't, then, she could lose her husband. She didn't want to do that.
Do you think it was out of fear as well, maybe, of
there
the
was
repercussions that she might face?
Yeah, there was that. I remember my mum left my husband. My mum left my dad 3 times.
Yeah.
That I remember, and I remember her going in the car, taking off, and within the day, she'd be back because she'd crashed the car. So that was 3 times that she crashed the car, and I don't think she ever did it again. But
why do you think? Did she crash the car because she was just a rubbish driver, or was it out of maybe because she was a bit shaky, or was it out of attention, right? To maybe sort of.
No, she was visibly shaken.
Visibly shaken
because he was violent. She was scared. As much as she loved him, she was frightened, and so you can just imagine a woman wanting to get out of that, which is a natural thing. You want to get out, but I think also she wanted to get out to shock him into sorting his life out.
It never worked.
Never worked. Well, it worked for a wee while. My dad would promise, I'll never do it again, and within a week or 2 weeks, he'd be back drinking just as bad as he was before. I don't think they realised how bad my dad was with alcohol. None of my relations really realised. In fact, some of my relations now would say to me, "Oh, it wasn't that bad," but it was bad. I lived with it, and my sister lived with it. So.
And what impact did that have on you then? So, seeing all of this, seeing the relationship between your mum and your dad, and your dad beating you and putting some of that aggression and that drunkenness towards you. Tell us a little bit about that and how he did that towards you, and also how that sort of made you feel. Because I did at uni. We're at uni. I did a study on fatherlessness, and fatherlessness isn't necessarily not seeing your father, but maybe not having a great father, a father who's abusive, and that the impact that can have on your sort of mental well-being, but also how you shape yourself as a person growing up. So what impact did all that sort of have on you?
Well, I think I want to be fair to my dad. My dad had a relationship with his dad that wasn't good, that was abusive. So there was 4 or 5 generations of alcoholics that didn't know how to behave, didn't know how to react to things. All my dad wanted was love. He would often say, "I want to go home." He would be drunk, and he'd be lying there, and all I want to do is I want to go home, and I want to be loved. And but there was love in the house. My mum absolutely doted on him. We doted on him, as violent as he was. We loved him, and he just didn't know how to receive that. So although my dad was an alcoholic, although he beat us up at the times, I understand that it wasn't all, he's a horrible person, because he wasn't a horrible person as in such.
Did you understand then?
No.
Oh, it's more now. So take yourself back to then.
Yeah.
What were your feelings to? I know that's difficult
Hated
and
the
hard.
guts.
But
Hated his guts.
yeah.
Couldn't stand them. And at the same time, I loved him because he took me to the football, took me to Aberdeen. But when I went to the football, he would go to the pub and get drunk, and he would make a fool of me, with all his mates. But it was for me, it was a bit of a release to go and watch the football, even though it was with my dad. I mean, many times, there was one time we were at Parkhead, in a place called the Jungle in Parkhead, and we were in the wrong place. The Jungle is where the Celtic fans were, and my dad, for some reason, got a ticket in the Jungle, and me and him went into this Jungle, and it was absolutely horrible. It was, but my dad was drunk, and so what he did was, in those days, everybody was so tight together and all standing, that he wanted the toilet, and he just did it where he was standing, and unfortunately he did it on a policeman, and the policeman took him and pulled him, put him down to the cells, and I was standing there. I think it was about 7, maybe 8 years old, and I was in this place with all these Celtic fans.
As an Aberdeen fan, were you wearing the Aberdeen kit as well?
Yeah, petrified, and not knowing what to do. So there was that kind of instances that went on. So I did live with fear. I did live with shame, because I couldn't protect my mum. I couldn't protect my sister, because that was one of the big things in Peterhead. When your dad goes, you're the one that protects the home. And as a small kid, that's what my job was.
As an 8-year-old.
As an 8-year-old, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't protect my mum. I couldn't protect my sister, and especially when my dad came home, there was no protection. So I did hate my dad. I know that's a strong word, but that was the feelings I had towards him because of what he. It was really weird. It was mixed, because I loved him. I looked up to him because he was my dad. He was a hero, really, at one point, but he was also this man who was violent towards my mum and my sister and me.
And there was obviously times he wasn't drunk all the time, was he?
No.
There were times where, even as you say, he'd promised your mum that he would be. He'd promised Granny that he'd be sober, and I'm guessing there were times where he probably was sober, and it was good. That's where you saw your dad.
Yeah.
But then when he turned to the drink,
he
turned into a completely different person.
Yeah, there were times he came on. He came off fishing and worked in a ASCO and BOC, which was oil and gas. And he worked on for about 2.5 years on shore. And his drinking wasn't as bad. And we saw a different side of my dad. He would go to work and he would be home. And maybe it's because he couldn't drink as much because he knew that he had to get up next morning and work. My dad was a hard worker. He was a hard worker. And that's the reason why he got so many jobs and good jobs at the time.
And he'd have been quite wealthy if he hadn't drank it all away, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would have been a wealthy man. A lot of the skippers of the boats wanted him because he could do things that other folks couldn't do, and he was a hard worker. But he would get extra money. Don't tell the taxman. But he got extra money for doing certain things on the boat. He would be the cook, and he would be the guy who would go down the howl, what we would call the howl, and sort the fish out in the bottom of the boat. And he would sort them out in such a way that when the fish came on shore, that people would look at the fish and they would say, this is well packed and all that kind of stuff. And they would pay more for the box.
So he was really good at his job.
He was really good at his
hard
job.
Worker.
Yeah.
So, your family life isn't so great. Your relationship with your dad isn't so great. You love him, but you hate him at the same time. And he's, abusive and an alcoholic. What impact did that have on you growing up? What kind of person were you? What kind of child were you growing up?
Angry. Scared. I went into myself quite a bit. So I was shy. And shy with everybody. I would sit back. I would probably say that I think it's Peter Kay that speaks about the thick table, and our thick table was table 5, and that's where I would be on the thick table.
And you're not thick. Well, maybe you were, but you're not necessarily
Well, I didn't.
thick.
I didn't have the education that I should have had.
Yeah.
Because of all that was going on. And I didn't think education was that important, to be honest. I just thought I was going to go to the sea, be like my dad. So I didn't really stick in at school. But I would be at the thick table and I would try and make everybody laugh. I would be the joker in the thing. Even though I was shy, it was really weird.
In the big group scenario, you sort of flourished, but if it was smaller conversations.
One-to-ones I wasn't very good at.
You think that was because of you didn't have a high sort of self-image?
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think at that point in primary school, everybody was trying to be the best, or trying to. I think that one of the things that did happen was that people fought to be the best, and there was always fighting going on. And I remember I didn't like fighting, to be honest. But there was one guy that I fought, and I thought, if I do him a lot of damage, then nobody will pick on me. And that's what I did. I really beat him. He was a mess. He was a bit of a mess. And I was about 10 or 11 at that time. And so I went into the academy. And when I was going out the academy, nobody touched me because nobody went near me. There was a couple of guys tried it. But they all thought I was a hard guy. I wasn't. I was a big softy, really.
Well, you're a big softy, yeah.
Yeah, so I did struggle. I struggled at school. I struggled with self-image. I struggled with all those different things. And there are some things that I said that I would never do. I said I'd never drink. I'd never hit a person. I'd never hit a woman. I'd never be abusive. All those things that you saw that were wrong that you say, I'm never going to do. Now, unfortunately, most of those things I did. I never hit a woman. I've never hit a woman. But the alcohol and other things, I did do.
You just copied your dad's behaviour to a certain degree.
Yeah. I copied, but I also enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because I was shy, alcohol opened me up, and I could speak to girls.
You've mentioned to me before that you drank alcohol quite a lot when you were younger. Paint an image to me of that. You said that you would go around the back of pubs and you would put a hole in a barrel and you'd be able to get, is that right, alcohol out? Or have I just made that up?
I don't know where he came from.
Oh,
It
okay.
wasn't a hole, but
Yeah.
I don't think I should be telling you this anyway.
Go for it. Go for it.
When we were young, we got to know that if you went down the back of the pubs, there was the barrels,
Yeah.
and if you put something into the barrel at the top, the alcohol would come out, obviously because that's what they did with bits of, and so it would come out, and then we would collect it or drink it. I can't exactly remember, and would all be bottles around there as well. So we would jump over the fences to get into the thing. So we would do that, and I was probably about 11 when I started doing that. But I was probably drinking. Yeah, well, I was probably drinking before that because my mum and dad would give me Advocat. Now they thought, well, they told me that Advocat was just a juice sort of stuff, but I've realised it was vodka. So
But it was strong.
it was
vodka or-
strongish. Yeah, they would put lemonade in it, and they would only give you a little bit. But that's,
Why did they do that?
I suppose, to shut me up, to quiet me down, and get me to sleep. I suppose, I don't know.
Did that sort of get you hooked? Do you think, looking back?
Well, it was a big thing in Scotland. Drinking was a big thing in Scotland, and everybody did it. You were a weirdo if you didn't. And so that's where you are. And I suppose when I started drinking, there would be, I think we have Hogmanay up in Scotland, and that
Hogmanay.
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 No, not Hogmanay.
Hogmanay.
No, Hogmanay.
Yeah.
And so a Hogmanay would be a time where you would go around the day before New Year's Day, and you would probably start about 10 o'clock. You'd go drink. You'd probably be drunk before you went to anybody's house anyway, and then you would go, and it would be after 12 o'clock, and you go to somebody's house, and you get Happy New Year, and they would take you in, they would give you food, and they would give you drink. And it didn't matter how old you were, everybody had a drink.
Yeah.
Because everybody was drunk, so they didn't really think about that. And so for maybe 4 or 5 days, you would be going to people's houses, and you'd be sleeping in people's houses, because you wouldn't go back home, you'd just be drunk, especially when you were young. So we would go around in gangs, and we would go to people's houses, and they would feed you, and you would get drink, and you'd sleep there, sleep it off, and then start again. So yeah, that would be the pattern. Maybe a week a drinking, and I suppose that's where I got my. I wouldn't say that I was addicted to alcohol, but I was drinking heavily, gradually getting worse and worse.
So all this is going on. Were you happy? Were you enjoying life?
No.
Outwardly,
people thought I was. People thought I was the life and soul of the party, but there was sometimes I can't even remember. I remember waking up in bed with girls, and not knowing how I got there, and not knowing who they were. That sounds. I don't know how that sounds really. It doesn't sound good. I'm pretty embarrassed of it, but so no, I didn't feel good. I felt horrible, really. I suppose the alcohol covered it up. But things began to change in my house. My mum just decided one day there must be more to life than this. And there was a little church that had just started, and she went along to it.
Was that the only experience you had with sort of religion and God then, before your mum went off to church, or did you not really give it much thought?
No, well, I knew what Christianity was.
Yeah.
But by that time I was an atheist. I mean, how could there possibly be a God when he allows all this stuff to go on? So I was an atheist. I believed in evolution. I would argue and debate with Christians, try and make a fool of them as much as I could. There was one guy that I was working with, a guy called James Youngson. I used to throw fish boxes at him, just to try and make him swear, and he never did, and I couldn't get over that. But Jesus, God, Christianity was just a big fairy story, really, to me. But my mum went to church, She came home one day and she said to me, she said, I've become a Christian. And I thought to myself, well, it's not her that needs it, it's my dad.
Mm.
Now, where did even that thought come from?
Mm.
And my mum sat me and my sister down and said, look, Dad's a mess, but I'm going to ask him to go to church, and I've prayed and asked Jesus to save me. I'm going to ask God to save him.
Mm.
And I went, what are you on about? That's never going to happen. Well, 6 days later, after my dad went to sea, he came home, was drunk, and I mean, there's a lot of things happened before that, mate. He knew the pastor of the church, a guy called Tony, who was a milkman. He was a part-time milkman, a part-time pastor, and he was a great guy. He would go to the football with my dad, and so my dad knew him, respected him, and so there was a relationship going on there. But my dad really, for the first time, really went to church then, and that Saturday night, he came back sober, a different man altogether. And you could see that in his face. There was something just different about him. And he sat with me and he said, look, Alistair, I want you to forgive me. I've done things that are horrible, and I'm never going to do them again. And I went, yeah, right. Because I'd seen it all before, because he'd put the whiskey down, well, whatever he drank, whiskey and rum, it was his drink. And he put all those down the sink. But this time he put it down the sink and there was something different. Because the atmosphere in the house was different. The attitude of my dad was different. But I wanted to see whether this was real. And unfortunately, I would put alcohol around the house to see if he would drink it. I'd put pornography around the house to see if he'd look at it. Hoping that he would do something, because deep down I realised that if this changed his life, it was real. And if it was real, it meant that I had to do something. And I didn't really want to do anything. I was, not that I was happy in my lifestyle, but that was my lifestyle. I didn't want to change it.
Yeah. So he poured all the alcohol down the sink, you put that out and he didn't touch it. Previously you said to me that he told you that he loved you. Was that sort of the first time that he told you that? Or was it the first time where he told you it and you thought, wow?
This is the first time that he told me that, and I knew he meant it. And that was hard to deal with. It was strange, because here was a guy now that I particularly didn't like, because of how he had made me feel and how he had made me act and react. And so that I had to deal with that over the years. I've had to deal with that. But at that time I just couldn't. So I just thought, after a while, I need to get out of this, because either he's gone mad, the alcohol's gone to his head, or this is real. And either way, I don't want to know. I want to get out.
Yeah.
So that's how I reacted. So I went to my work one day and I thought, I know what to do. I'll get married. And if I get married, that'll get me out of the house. I was just over 16. I was between 16 and 17, I think I was. And I looked over and I thought, yeah, she'll do. I'll marry her. That's the kind of dysfunctional thinking, dysfunctional thought, dysfunctional family that I was in. And she was a nice girl. Came from a nice family, really. But obviously she must have been a bit dysfunctional to have any kind of liking to me. Because our existence really was, or our relationship was, alcohol. And our relationship was abuse, really. Not physical abuse, but just verbal, and it wasn't very nice, really. But I asked her to get married within a few months, and she decided, yeah, and we were going to get married. And I thought, this is the way out of this. But more and more, my dad's life really spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
The more I watched him, the more I seen him, there was such a difference,
Mm.
such a love. And even though there was the anger in me and there was the trying to push him away, he just. I remember one day coming at the house and my mum and my dad on their knees on the settee, at the settee, and hearing them praying for me and my sister.
Mm.
And I suppose that really affected me. But again, that effect was.
Yeah, this is a man who's been abusing you and
Yeah,
abusing your family.
yeah,
To then see a complete shift
yeah.
must have been
It
sort
was
of
it was quite a
life
shock.
changing,
Yeah,
life shocking. Yeah, shocking.
it was quite a shock because you think to yourself, this is what you wanted. This is what I wanted. I wanted my dad to be different. I wanted my dad to be loving. But now that he is, I couldn't cope with it
Mm.
because I was swiftly going the way that my dad was, not knowing how to show love,
Mm.
not knowing how to care for people, not knowing how to act and react in situations, just like my dad didn't.
Mm-hmm.
How were you to act? How were you
Mm.
to do things?
And this bitterness, was it just still growing towards your dad, or has it started to grow towards this God who you said at the time didn't exist? Because if it did exist, then all this stuff that had been happening to me wouldn't happen.
Well, at that time, God didn't really mean anything to me. I was an atheist, as I said,
Mm.
but the more I watched my dad, the more I started to think, man, there must be something in this.
Mm.
There must be something in this. And I remember, I suppose one thing that really speaks to me now that I don't know if it spoke to me then, but when I was with this girl, she said, "This is where we're going to get married in this Church of Scotland. We need to go here because we need to show face." Well, she did go to church. She went to this Church of Scotland, which was, I didn't know at the time, but it was a liberal church. It didn't believe the gospel. It didn't believe the things that Christians should believe.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy would tell little stories and try to apply the story to something, but how on earth he did it, I don't.
Mm.
But anyway, I remember going to this and listening to him, and the girl said to me, she said, "Well, so what do you think?" I said, "Well, I'm not coming here. That guy doesn't even believe in the Bible. He doesn't believe anything." Now, where did that come from?
Mm.
I mean, at the time, that's what I thought. At the time, that's what I knew. But looking back now, obviously, there's a God moment,
Mm-hmm.
as it were, and this just changed my life. I said to the girl, I said, shortly after we finished, shortly after, I just realised that I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to get married in this. This is just a farce.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a light being switched on. Now, I mean, I didn't deal with it very well. I didn't deal with her very well. I was childish and pathetic, and I know I had to go back and apologise to her, and I did. But it was the best thing that happened to me and to her because, really, it was a moment that God really started speaking into my life.
Mm. And the impact that your dad's sort of change had on you, that led to a moment in your life where you also experienced some sort of change and you met God and God changed your life. Tell us how you got to that point.
Well, again, as I said, the girl and me finished, and I was at a loose end, as it were. My mum said, why don't you come to church? So I was going along to church. I went along to church, to her church, that with this minister who was a milkman and I knew him.
Football, yeah.
Yeah, I loved football, and I would go to the football with him, and I would watch him, and I'd watch my dad, shouting at the referee, but no swearing, no taking the Lord's name in vain, and I'm like, what? How did they do that?
Mm.
And my dad, just being he was still the life and soul of the party, but the party had no alcohol in it,
Mm-hmm.
and the party had no swearing or anything like that in it. And I just amazed. And so as I was going to church, I saw people's lives who I knew showing reality, showing Christian reality, that you could live in the world that I lived in and not be the same as me and be happy. And that just blew my mind.
Was that the difference you saw in them from their past, that you could see actually they're content here, they're, they're happy, they're joyful?
Yeah.
And did you want that
Yeah.
at the time?
Yeah, I did. I did want it, but I wasn't prepared to pay the price.
There's a song I listened to recently, and it says this, maybe this sort of so I don't want to go all weird and start, but yeah,
it's okay.
It says it's sort of what culture tells us to do even now. Maybe it was the same back then, but it says, I've been told to live my own truth and do whatever makes me feel good. Get rid of boundaries. The rules are stifling. Chase good feelings that soon will be gone. But this is what it says. But I found myself more lost than ever, enslaved and bound to my desires, and that's not freedom.
Yeah.
Does that sort of sum up?
Very much so.
Your life?
I don't know that song, but very much so. Yeah. I thought I had freedom, but really I was bound.
So how did that all change?
I went to, as I said, I went to the church. Now, I could hardly read or write. And the only Bibles at that time was the authorized, these and thous. And I was given a Bible, an authorized Bible. Well, actually, I think I found it because I didn't want anybody to know I was reading it. So I'd be in bed reading this Bible, or trying to read it, trying to understand it, not really knowing what it was. And then I watched these videos. These videos speaking about Jesus coming again, and I'm like, wow, this is scary, frightening stuff. So all my mates thought that I was going to church because there was a girl there, and I was quite happy for them to know that or think that, but it was nothing to do with it. I was going to church because I saw something different, and I realized that there was a God. I realized then and there that Jesus Christ was real. Because of all that was going on, because of what I'd read, because of what I'd seen, because of the lives that were being lived before me, my mum and my dad, I knew that there was a God. I knew that there was Jesus. And so one night I came home from a meeting, and I said to my mum said, would you like to come to an extra meeting? I said, no, I'm going home to put myself right with God. Now, that wasn't true. I was going home to put the TV on to forget. Because although I knew, I didn't want to pay the cost, because I knew it would mean to stop drinking, to stop the relationships that I was having, to stop doing the things that I was doing, or no way that I could stop swearing. So how could I do this? I wasn't good enough to do it. So I went home, and I got a knock at the door. I was in the house about 10 minutes. I'd made my tea, sitting watching All Creatures Great and Small or something like that. And he just said, I'm here because God sent me. And I didn't laugh. I didn't think he was crazy. I knew. As soon as he opened the door, I knew. And we went inside. He explained the gospel to me, and I asked a few questions like, how can I keep this? And he was telling me, and he says, it's not up to you, it's God will keep you. And he said to me, so what do you want to do? I says, I want to ask Jesus into my life. And I got down on my knees. I prayed. Can't remember what I prayed. But I can remember getting off my knees and feeling nothing. I didn't hear any
a
sounds,
bright light or anything like that. No.
Nothing like that. I just knew that Jesus Christ had changed me. I just knew that God was in my life. I phoned the pastors immediately after I phoned the pastor. I says, when can I preach? And the pastor just said, whoa, wait a minute, Alistair, wait a minute. And he took me to the side and he helped me, and he said to me, he says, I'd like you to go into Sunday school. I said, oh yeah, Sunday school teacher. Yeah, that'll be good. Now, I knew nothing. I could hardly read or write. I was 19, nearly 20. And he said, go into Sunday school. I was in a Sunday school with all these kids, and that's where I learned the Bible. It's where I learned all the stories. 19-year-old, 20-year-old with all these kids at 6, 7, 8 year old. And I learned. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I remember though this, when I was a kid, I was sent to Sunday school. Right?
You hated it.
I hated it, but my mum and dad sent me away to Sunday school on a Sunday afternoon. And I remember going to this Sunday school, and there was a lady called Mrs. West, Margaret West. I mean, I didn't know her as Margaret; it was Mrs. West, and I was a pain in the neck, and she threw me out of Sunday school. Well, that church that I went to, Mrs. West was there, and I went round to her door to tell her I'd become a Christian, and she opened the door and she says, "Yes, Alistair, what do you want?" And I said, "Margaret, I just want to thank you for all your prayers that you prayed. I've become a Christian." And you should have seen the shock on her face. "You've become a Christian." "You know, Alistair, I gave up on you. I gave up on you." Now, that really shook me, to be honest, because it was then that I realised how bad I was. I didn't know how bad I was. But she took me in, and she was just lovely. She was just brilliant. I would speak to her every day at church, and when I went to church. Margaret West, she was lovely. She was just amazing.
Yeah. So, you become a Christian. You say you've not sort of experienced any big flashing lights. You've not, heard voices in your head, but there's a change in your life. An instant change, but also a change over time. What happens after that? So you're, 17?
19.
19,
nearly
19, 20. You're still working in the factory. You're still fishing. What's next? What do you do next with your life?
Well, one of my mates said to me, "Are you going out, Alistair?" Because we would go out together and we would do things that I don't really want to speak about. But Sandy was his name, and Sandy came to me one day and he just fell on his knees, crossed himself, and said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." I said, "What are you doing, Sandy?" He says, "I just heard you've become a Christian." And he says, "I suppose that's us finished then."
Wow.
And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I can't. I'm not doing what you're doing." He says, I ain't stopping drinking. You will have now." And I said, "Yeah, that's right. I've stopped all that, and that's it, finished." And that was it. So I lost a lot of friends, not because I wanted to lose them. It was simply because they knew that I wouldn't be going to the same places they were going to. So that was a big thing. But I suppose at that time, there was a lot of growing as a Christian, a lot of reading, a lot of trying to understand what had really happened, a lot of sitting and listening to people, trying to understand prayer, trying to understand reading God's word. What do I get out of it? What do I put into it? All those kind of things. What do you pray? Why do you pray?
Lots of questions.
Lots of questions. Yeah. And lots of things that I would ask older Christians how to do all these things. But I also had to learn to read and write properly. So that was a big thing.
So your life's completely changed and transformed. You feel a sense of freedom from your past, forgiveness for some of the things that you've done in the way that you were living, but also healing in a sense, healing from sort of the trauma of the family that you were growing up in. A loving relationship with your parents. Your whole family life is transformed. You go off to Bible college in Scotland. Tell us briefly how you got off to Bible college and a little bit about how that helped you develop as a Christian.
Well, there was just a couple of things before that I just want to say.
Yeah.
There was one point that, when you become a Christian, you're forgiven, right? You're forgiven past, present, and future. It's gone. But there are things that maybe you have to go back to get forgiveness. Not to get forgiveness, but to actually to put that to bed. And God pointed out certain things to me that I had to go back and put right. One was the girl. The other one was when I was young, I had a paper job and I stole things from the shop. I would steal papers and sell them. I would steal juice, lemonade, and I would steal videos, all things like that. And I remember just being on my knees one night, and God really convicted me of this. So I went to the man, the store that I was the paper boy, should I say? And I went to him and I said, James, I want to tell you that I have done this. Now, all the way there, I was going, right, okay, if this means prison, it means prison. Okay, Lord, you're going to have to help me here because I really, blah, blah, blah. But I really thought that James was going to get me arrested and I was going to go to prison. I was prepared for that because I wanted to put it right. And I went in and I said, can I speak to you? We went out to the back and I said, James, all that time that I was a paper boy, I stole this and I stole that. And he says, I just want to apologise. I want to say sorry. And I want to make amends for that. I want to pay that all back if I can. And he says, why do you think you never got a pay rise? Now, I was flabbergasted. And he said, Alistair, it's forgiven. Now, he was not a Christian, but he said it's forgiven. And it was like music to my ears. I went out high as a kite. But I knew that I had to put things right, and I did. There was a lot of things that I had to put right. Anyway, that's just something I needed to say, that just because you become a Christian and everything's forgiven, there are times when you have to sort the past out, not to be forgiven by God because that's forgiven,
But because it's the right thing to do, isn't it?
the right thing to do. I think it's Jude that speaks about going back and putting things right. I think it's Jude. I might be wrong. But so I become a Christian. Getting on okay at church. They were asking me to do things at church. They were asking me to do a 5-minute talk, and they were asking me to pray and open the meetings and things like that. And I was doing that, and I was enjoying it. But I felt that there was more. I always felt that there was more, and that always came back when I got off my knees when I first became a Christian. When can I preach? So there was this man who came from Slavic Gospel Association. He came one Wednesday night, and I went to the meeting, and he spoke about the call of God. Now, I'd never heard about this before, never heard. Or maybe was told, but never really stuck in. But it really spoke to me that night. And I went to the man afterwards, and he was a guy called Bennett. I can't remember his first name, but I think it was John Bennett. And he was in Slavic Gospel Association, but he was also on the Faith Mission. And before he'd gone into Slavic Gospel or something like that. And anyway, I spoke to him, and he suggested going to my minister. I said to him, I want to do something more for God. That's all, He said, go and speak to your pastor. Went and spoke to the pastor, and the pastor knew that there was something happening with me. And just said, look, here's 2 Bible colleges. One the Faith Mission and the other one the BTI in Glasgow. So it's Bible Training Institute in Glasgow, Faith Mission in Edinburgh. Well, I fancied going to Glasgow because I thought, well, I can go and see Rangers and Celtic play Aberdeen. That was my thinking. Mm-hmm. Daft, isn't it? But there you are.
Good thinking, though.
So
football. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that, is there?
Nothing wrong with football.
Nothing wrong with football.
Nothing wrong with sport.
So well, it depends. Depends who you are, because we've not had a very good weekend, have we?
No, we haven't.
Football-wise.
Let's not talk about that.
Man United have just played Brighton and got beat 3-1.
Let's not talk about that.
Anyway.
Let's not talk about that.
Glasgow and Rangers.
Yeah, so I was in... I picked up the phone. I got the phone number. I phoned them. I phoned the BTI, and there was no answer. So I took that as leading from God, that I wasn't to go there. Phoned the Faith Mission, and third or fourth ring, Tilly Thompson, a lady, she was absolutely brilliant. She was amazing. And Tilly...
did she understand a word you were saying?
Yes.
Because I have been up to Peterhead to see family members, and I have no idea. I cannot understand my own grandparents calling me a bonny
loony.
A bonny loony. What the heck's a bonny loony?
A boy. So, so Tilly had missioned in the northeast of Scotland, and knew the accent, and she just You know, I was broad Peterhead, and she heard me, and it was the best person to listen to do that. So God had that in control. Organised a time for me to come up to have an interview, sent out papers for me to fill in. I got people to help me to fill it in, sent it back, got an interview time. I went, and that was quite amazing. There was quite a lot of things happened even in that I had a car, and I went and filled up the car of diesel and got the oil sorted. When I went up, there was smoke coming from the car, and what happened was I hadn't put the oil top on, you know, and I had to go back down looking for this oil lid or whatever you call it, and I went back, I couldn't find it, and I said to the guy, I said, have you got an oil thing to put on the top of here? And he said, oh, that's impossible, you'll never find that. And I said, oh, well, this is not what the Lord wants. Maybe I did make a mistake, because by that time I was feeling a bit thick and everything. And anyway, he goes into the back of the garage and finds this thing. And he says, it's a petrol cap. Let's see if that fits. So I put the petrol cap on top of the oil, and it worked.
Mm-hmm.
And off I went to Edinburgh. So there's lots of little different things that had happened.
Yeah.
Got this interview, passed the interview, passed all the stuff, went into Bible college, and there I was, 25 years old, thick as two short planks, couldn't speak English, could hardly read or write, sticking in a Bible college. Mad. Bonkers. Absolutely crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. But you got through it.
How on earth I got through it, I don't know.